Next, Trent Murray is back with Mike Turner of Latham Watkins to examine the European market and look at who's investing, what they want to achieve, and how the opportunity in Europe is different from the opportunity in the States.
Thanks so much, and thank you to everyone for continuing to stay with us today. We are now going to have a conversation about the state of investing in esports in Europe. So much of what we talk about is based on the United States and everything going on there, but with esports being such a global industry, it's important to get a look at everything going on in other aspects of the industry outside of the US. So Mike, to start off, esports is part of a much larger video game entertainment industry that you have a great deal of experience working in on the financial side. Are there any historical trends in that space specifically that can be applied to the current state of esports investment in Europe?
Oh, Trent, I think there are. Yes, I think if you go back beyond the advent, if you like, of the video game industry, this was all about eyeballs, right? It's all about attracting consumers and delivering the content to consumers that consumers then demand. And video games really emerged head and shoulders above almost any other sector in the home entertainment economy in the last few years. And now I think we can see that esports will follow on very naturally from that as people look for new content and new ways of interacting with that content.
And like gaming itself, esports is such a global industry where things that are happening in China, Europe, Korea, Southeast Asia affect things that are going on in the United States. How does that affect the investment activity in the space, and specifically the investment opportunity for US-based investors that might be looking at Europe's esports market?
Sure. Well, I think in very simple terms, what leads from the States follows very quickly in Europe. And we've seen in almost every slice of the consumer internet market that US investors will follow into Europe very quickly after they've proven the market in the US. And we've seen a huge amount of US capital coming across the Atlantic in the last few years, including into the video game space. And now we're seeing a lot of the US buyers acquiring content, acquiring studios in Europe, and increasingly right around Europe as well. So I think there will be a huge flow of transatlantic investment. We're just beginning to see the investment flow into esports generally in Europe.
Now, we've heard today about a lot of opportunity and growth that the esports industry has experienced this year, but we've also heard about the sheer fact that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted every aspect of the esports industry, and that includes finance and investment. How has the pandemic impacted Europe's investment activity specifically?
Well, in many ways, I think quite positively as we end the 2020 year. I think there was a big pause for breath as people kind of tried to work out what it was that consumers wanted. But I think what has happened is the fact that people have been locked up at home has absolutely driven the demand for video games generally and esports in particular in the context of this conversation. So I think now as we exit 2020 and move into 2021, the numbers are providing the very answer to your question. I think consumer demand is really beginning to emerge, and it's not just related to COVID. I think COVID has caused people to rethink how they want to consume entertainment, consume esports, but that will then be a legacy trend, if you like.
Now, we've talked a lot today about 2020, about the current state of things, but we also want to make sure to look forward to 2021 and beyond. Now, as you look to the future, what sort of trends do you see manifesting next year and beyond? And specifically, what sort of initiatives does Latham Watkins have to be able to act on these trends next year?
So look, very simply put, as a law firm, as a global law firm, when we look at the esports market, we are beginning to see a huge amount of demand for regulatory advice and licensing work and those types of things as the companies build. And now that is moving into the corporate advice as well, the fundraising for these companies. We disclosed the funding round for Stakester in Europe, for example, in the esports field. We've just seen the second European IPO of David Beckham's Guild Esports in the UK. So I think there'll be a huge amount of corporate activity moving into 2021 as the investors just get more comfortable with the whole concept of esports and the consumer demand for esports.
Absolutely, and we'll certainly be keeping an eye on that going forward. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time today. We really appreciate your insight.
It's a great pleasure.